Meeting is live. Meeting is now live.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Phil McIntosh. I'm the Interim Delivery Manager for the West team in the Shared Planning Service, and I'm the chair of this meeting. I'd like to welcome you all to the Cambridge City Council's Development Control Forum taking place at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, the 25th of October. The forum relates to the construction of an extension at roof level to create 3 additional flats, car parking and associated works at Adiva Court, Cambridge. I will roll call councillors alphabetically by surname to see who is present. We have received apologies from councillors Collis and Porra. Please advise if you know of any further apologies from other councillors when I ask you to speak. So are you present, councillors? Agent? Bennett?
Here, Chair.
Dryden? Gawthorpe Wood? Agecroft? Smart?
Yeah, present, Chair. I had a text from Councillor Gawthorpe Wood to say that she was having problems with her connection to the internet, so she might not be able to join us.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. Thornborough?
Present.
Now, that any other substitutes from Planning Committee with us today?
Councillor Howard is with us.
So Howard, thank you. And the officers permanently at the table for this meeting are Senior Planner Charlotte Spencer, Committee Manager Sarah Steed, and Meeting Producer Chris Connor. We're also joined by representatives of the applicant, and could you please introduce yourselves?
Good morning, Chair. My name is Alan Hanafi. I'm the agent from Union 4 Planning. I am being joined in the meeting by Stephanie Brooks of Brooks Murray Architects, but I believe she's having some difficulty. She is apparently in the meeting room awaiting to gain access.
Thanks, Alan. Sarah or Chris, can we see if we can look at that, please?
Yeah, I think she's now in the meeting. I can see her in the list of participants.
All right, thank you. We are also joined by representatives of the petitioners, and can you please confirm that you are present?
Thank you. My name is Janet Grimwood. Sorry, no, the petitioners. Sorry.
Thank you, Janet.
And my name is Philip Kratz. I'm here on behalf of the petitioners as well.
Thank you, Philip.
And my name is Al Dixon. On behalf of the petitioners as well. Well, I am one of the petitioners.
Thank you very much. And we're also joined by some City Ward councillors, I believe. Councillor Davies, are there any other City Ward councillors with us today?
Morning, Chair.
Morning. If anyone has any... Oh, sorry.
Jenny Gawthorpe Wood, I'm on the planning committee.
Oh, thank you, Jenny. Yes, I heard you were having problems getting in, but thank you for confirming you're here.
I'm on the phone. Until Virgin decide to do something weird and with the mobile network.
Yeah. Welcome, thank you. If anyone has any problems hearing me throughout the meeting, please alert me by waving your hands or typing in the meeting chat function. I'll just run through a couple of housekeeping matters now before we start. Can I please ask that all participants keep themselves muted unless they have been invited to speak by the chair, and to keep your backgrounds blurred. If members would like to ask a question or get the attention of the chair, can you please type speak or the letter S in the chat function, or raise your virtual hand. The chair will introduce you when you're able to speak, and the chat function will be regularly checked by myself as the chair or the committee manager. And please note that people who have followed the published meeting link will only be able to watch the meeting and will not be able to participate. Please also note that there is about a 20-second delay between the actual meeting and the meeting which the public can view on the live stream. And this meeting is automatically recorded and will be available for public viewing via the Council's YouTube account. The aims of the forum are to allow early discussion of the planning issues and to explore the scope for agreement and compromise between all sides. And the format of the forum is as follows. So introductions by myself and declarations of councillor interests. Presentation of the, that's 5 minutes. Presentation of the application by the applicant agents. There's up to 3 representatives, principally to address the issues raised by the petitioners. That's up to 15 minutes. Presentation of the views of the petitioners against the application, up to 3 representatives for 15 minutes. Presentation by the planning officer, up to 10 minutes. Comments made by ward councillors, up to 15 minutes. Member questions and issues arising, up to 30 minutes. Summing up by the applicant agent, up to 5 minutes, and then summing up by the petitioners against the application, up to 5 minutes, and any final comments from myself. Please, could councillors confirm if they have any declarations of interest? No? Okay, thank you. Please, could the applicant agent deliver their presentation? You have 15 minutes and the committee manager will advise you when your speaking time is up. So please begin your presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and members of the Development Control Forum. My name is Alan Hanafi from Union 4 Planning, and I act as the planning consultant and agent for the application before you this morning. I'm joined by Stephanie Brooks of Brooks Murray Architects. Stephanie and her colleagues have designed the proposed development. We are also joined by Ellie Reich from Avon Ground Rent, who is the applicant for the proposed development. We have prepared a presentation providing clarifications and responses to the matters raised in the petition. We would also welcome the opportunity to answer any questions that officers or councillors wish to ask in relation to the current planning application and proposed development. I'll now hand over to Stephanie, who will take us through the presentation.
Thanks very much, Chair and Alan, for the introduction. What I'm going to do is I'm going to very briefly present the scheme as we've designed it. And then what we've done is that we've prepared a number of slides which address the specific issues that have been raised in the petition. Hopefully that would sort of explain what our response to that is and give us an agenda for discussion afterwards. So the brief overview of the development, I'm sure people don't need reminding, but essentially we're off Woolston Way, and just in order for people to be orientated, there's a north point here. So when we talk about the north facade, it's the side facing Woolston Court, and so on and so forth. Another quick reminder of what the proposal is: we intend to take the material that has been used for this central stair area, and the idea is that we're going to create an extension using exactly the same material, and it's articulating based on the current articulation of the building. So this front section will stay forward. There'll be a main section sat on these wings, and then it articulates again on the lower section, and the materials of course will match exactly those that are there already. for this presentation, what we've done is that we've set up a series of photo montages just so that people can understand what it's going to look like. And obviously this is the principal view down the approach, the pub's on the right-hand side. And you can see here, this is what I was saying, that central core goes up. There's this dark extra story. And it, you know, the general principle is that it's a modern interpretation of a traditional form where you have the brick walls, you've got the dark roof on the top, and then in this particular case, there's some dormers that pop up. We've got our windows that do the same thing, and this is the photo montage on that view. We've got a second view here, which is from the shops. We've purposely chosen a winter view to make sure that people can see what we're proposing, but obviously that goes. The scale is quite good to be defined by the scale of these trees. You can see that even with this extra floor, we're well below the trees. And then just sort of for completeness, what we've done is that we've taken a view which is on the corner of Wilson Way and Queen Edith's Way, and just dotted on the sort of scale of the building. So from this point, you won't be able to see the building at all. You don't see the building. And that's the proposal in its final form. A quick reminder about what we're proposing: 3 flats, a 1-bed, a 2-bed, a 3-bed. Each of the flats have their own private space. The 3-bed flat has 2. The others have 1 each. So that's a summary of the scheme itself. And now what we've done is we've teased out each one of the individual points. And the first issue is the concern about the noise and disturbance, which is an understandable concern. It's a problem for all of us when we have to put up with building works. And the petitioners may not be aware of the council practice that we would be definitely required to produce for the scheme a detailed construction, environment and management plan prior to any works beginning. And the management plan is likely to be a condition on the planning permission, and that plan will cover things such as noise, dust, wheel washing, construction vehicle routing, timeframes for deliveries, and so on and so forth. And all of that will be discussed in detail before the works begin, and it'll be published as part of the conditions. There was an understandable concern about parking and the provision of extra spaces. And I think I need to remind people that our proposals are made against the backdrop of a serious climate emergency that we are all experiencing. And in fact, Cambridge City Council themselves declared a climate emergency in 2019 and emphasised the need for us all to shift towards sustainable modes of transport. There's, national now and local planning policies are asking us to reduce our reliance on travel in vehicles and trying to promote opportunities for active travel, such as walking, cycling and public transport. And in fact, our strategy for the parking here was informed by a consultant. We had a highways consultant, Royal Hasconing DHV, and they carried out a survey on the 26th and 27th of May, day and night. And the survey indicated that there is parking availability within 200 metres of the site. And so we're proposing 1 extra site, which will go to the 3-bedroom flat, which is the flat that's most likely to house a family. Any impact then on Adiva Court and construction vehicles will be dealt with under the CEMP. Now, as a consequence of this extra space, we are impinging on the entrance. And this is a point that I think that we are very happy to compromise on. I thought it would be interesting for the petitioners to see what the size of an emergency vehicle is. And this is the big beast that the fire service uses. It's the tender that has the ladders on top, and you can see that that's 2.5 wide. And originally we were proposing a 3.1 gate, but in discussion with your colleagues at Building Control, they would prefer to see a 3.7 metre gate, and that is something that we'd be more than happy to accommodate. And you can see that at the bottom here, we've got the new parking bay. It'll still leave us a curb where we could put some planting there. So that is certainly a point that we'd be more than happy to accommodate. And then also the issue of the lift, this was raised. We looked at whether or not we could do a lift, and people who live in a Diva Court will know that there's nowhere that we can splice a lift within the floor plan without actually impinging on somebody's flat. There's the central hallway has the staircase in it, and thereafter there's the cross corridor. So if we were to propose a lift, we'd either have to propose it on the front here, or it would be on the side. And again, in consultation with the Cambridge City Building Control Team, the 3C shared services, they've confirmed that a lift is not required by building regulations for this particular scheme in terms of its height. And so we think the very negative impact that putting a lift on the outside would create. And my client is on other blocks have calculated that a lift in terms of maintenance adds an extra £2,000 onto management charges. So we've opted not to put a lift in the scheme. The other really important point that was raised was the consideration of privacy. And we've done a simple diagram here to show what the issue is. The first thing is that on the north facade, there are no windows proposed. So that's the north face. There's no windows proposed on this face. On this face, we do have 3 windows, one of which is into a secondary bedroom. But the Cambridge City Council Housing Development and Design Guide suggests that a 20-metre separation of window to window and habitable rooms is sufficient to ensure adequate privacy. And as you can see here, we are 38.2 metres away from these properties. So we feel that, with almost twice as far distance and also the fact that apart from the window in this second bedroom, these are secondary windows, which we would be very happy to have frosted if the planners felt that was appropriate. That would be absolutely fine. There's another issue here, which is that we do have 2 small balconies we're proposing. And what we're proposing here is frosted glass on the side of those to prevent sideways looking, which is exactly as on the existing flats. You can see these are the screens that are on the balconies below, and that's what we're proposing on our scheme here. Those points that I made are listed here. So when we publish this, those points made. Now, again, impact on daylight and sunlight. Our scheme has been tested, as are the requirements by the planning authority. They've been tested by and informed by a daylight and sunlight assessment. That's a technical document which is available online, which we could share directly with applicants if they'd be interested in that. And we're very delighted to report that of the 21 individual windows that we've tested, not one of them it comes out with a score that's not perfectly acceptable under the BRE guidance. But in order to assist in this conversation here, what we've done is that we've set up on the computer, which we were able to do, precise shadow diagrams. And the usual one that's taken for these is the 21st of March equinox. And so what we've done is we've marked in red what the current situation is, and then the shadow shows the future. And of course, it's not, it's obvious because we're adding an extra floor on. The shadow gets longer. And we know that the sun is basically rising in the east. It's coming over and setting in the west. And so in the morning, the sun is directly behind us. The extra shadow is cast here. During the middle of the day, that's when the neighbours are really rightly concerned. And what you can see is that there is a very tiny little margin here where that does have an impact, which is important. And then later on in the day, obviously the sun is cast further back, and so we're confident that the impact of the light is going to be absolutely minimal. The petitioners are very concerned about fire, and I think that this, again, for all of us, is a very legitimate anxiety that nowadays architects at design stage, we take this very, very seriously. But nonetheless, once works begin, there will definitely be a fire consultant appointed to look at these matters in absolute detail. But I did think it would be quite useful for people to understand that the building regulations have 2 crucial cutoff points in terms of the height of proposed buildings. The first cutoff point is 11 metres, and there's a raft of requirements that come onto design at 11 metres. And then the second crucial height is 18 meters. And here we've done a diagram to show that actually what we are proposing, the new floor is 8.6. So even I think the roof will just squeak in at 11. So we're well below the threshold for anything that even gets remotely considered a tall building. And a tall building is actually considered one that's about 20 stories. So, but 11 is the cutoff. So I, again, wanted to reassure people that we're taking this matter very, very seriously. And at 8.6 meters, it's not considered a tall building, which doesn't mean that there won't be a whole series of requirements that we do have to put in place in terms of materials, fire doors, and so on and so forth. This particular slide was going to be addressed, Alan, by our client, but I've just had a note put in front of me to say that he is in America and he's having technical problems. So it's not just Virgin that's giving trouble with the internet. So I'm happy to talk to this slide. There were a number of points raised which asked the question of whether this proposal would deal with what we perceive to be. We don't have the full picture, but it seems to us that there are some current problems with the existing building, which we're not familiar with. And our client, of course, doesn't manage the building. The building is managed, self-managed by the tenants. But I think 2 points were raised. One was the noise from internal pipes. There was an issue of whether the the fire doors need to be on automatic release. And I think that what we can say for certain is that any of these matters, which are, for example, building control matters, absolutely will be dealt with by us. Things like noise from the soil pipes and points like that, which clearly are not necessarily building control issues, but my client has indicated an absolute willingness to work with the management team on this to see if there's ways in which we can help with any kind of existing or extant building problems. I hope that answers that, and that might be a discussion for another day. People were concerned about bikes, and I think, again, my comments on parking stand. And in fact, we're introducing 6 extra secure bike parking, and we want to put it here so it's very convenient for people. It'll be secure, it'll be lockable, and what we're going to also do, of course, is provide a Sheffield stand for visitors. So that will be 2 people can come by bike. So there is provision within our proposals for, in effect, 8 extra bikes, 6 of them for residents. And the construction working hours, again, I did touch on this about the CEMP. The usual working hours for construction sites are 8 till 4. That's the usual requirements, and the local authorities will have their specific hours. There's been a suggestion that 9 to 4 would be ideal, and again, we are saying that's something that we would be perfectly prepared to go along with if that was considered to be important. The other thought, though, I mean, the downside of that, of course, is that by reducing the working hours, it obviously prolongs the contract period. And I think most of us know that the majority of workmen do try to start very early because they travel outside of peak hours. So one of the suggestions that we wanted to make is possibly we could certainly agree that there would be no noisy work, say, before 9 o'clock, but painters could start. Perhaps, planning could take place. But again, that's something that we can absolutely negotiate. And the other thing that we've negotiated on many schemes is that there might be quiet times during the day. So say between 1 o'clock and 2:30 when people are having their lunch or when babies need to sleep and so on and so forth, there can be an agreement that there won't be work done during those times. So I think that that's something that we can be absolutely flexible about, bearing in mind the potential to prolong the contract, which is in no one's interest.
Stephanie, your 15 minutes is up. Have you got much to go? Have you got much to go through?
No, very last slide, which is again a point of compromise, which is that somebody's pointed out about the green roof. They may not be aware that we absolutely are proposing to replace the green roof on top. The dark green shows what we've got in the current plan. If this is something that's of concern to people, we've identified that there's potential where we could actually increase it even more by putting it there and there. And again, that would make 128 square meters more than existing. So again, we're very happy to increase that there. And Chair, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank
I
you
will
very much.
unshare my screen. I've stopped sharing and I will go on to mute.
Chair, if I may interrupt, there's a message that's been posted in the chat, I think by Janet Grimwood, about somebody who's been removed from the meeting. Just to confirm, we haven't removed anybody from the meeting. If they are able to click on the Teams link to see if they can get back in again.
I think it's very important that we have Al Dixon, who is representing leaseholders, and
Oh,
he
he's
is
back.
there.
He's
Thank
back.
you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Sarah. Thank you, Stephanie. Could the petitioners please deliver their presentation? Likewise, you have 15 minutes, and the committee manager will advise you when your speaking time is up. That will be listed in the chat. So if the petitioners could begin their presentation, thank you.
Thank you very much. I will start. My name is Philip Kratz. I'm a former local government chief officer in Cambridgeshire at district council level. I'm accredited as a planning specialist by the Law Society. I'm a legal member of the Royal Town Planning Institute, and I'm a current member of the Law Society's Planning Law Committee. I'll start with the existential question, the why are we here? And just to set a context for all this, the major changes in the General Permitted Development Order, which came into effect in August 2020 as part of an initiative to remove planning obstacles, and that bit's in inverted commas, to revitalise town centres, included several new permitted development rights for rooftop extensions and new dwellings in those. The first of those new rights allowed for the extension of existing buildings through the addition of 1 or 2 stories. Now, they're permitted development rights, so you might beg the question, well, why are we here? Well, it's because this site is within the protected zone of Cambridge Airfield. And again, to contextualise this, in the first 40 years of my practice, I was never involved in proposals to add additional stories to blocks of flats. In the last 2 years, I've been involved in helping 8 different communities try to resist these proposals. In each case, they were planning applications, not PD rights. And once it is necessary to have a full planning application, everything is in the melting pot. You're not just looking at the protection of the airfield. It means that it's exposed to the full width of the City Council's planning policies. Now, in that context, I am concerned about driving coaches and horses through your well-established local plan policies. For example, local plan policy 51 deals with accessible homes. Now, never mind the minimum standards required by building regulations, your planning policies for decades now have been trailblazers in ensuring accessibility of homes. That policy requires all housing development, and that's without exception, should be of a size, configuration and internal layout to enable building regs requirements M42, accessible and adaptable dwellings to be met. And the explanatory text goes on to explain an accessible home supports the changing needs of residents from raising children through to mobility issues faced in old age or through disability. This essentially allows people to live in their home for as much of their life as possible, and it goes on to explain about the design features that will include. These flats plonked on top of an existing scheme, of course, will have none of that. Local Plan Policy 52 deals with ostensibly protecting garden land and the subdivision of existing dwelling plots. Now, of course, that was because when it was drafted, nobody in their right minds thought that people would come along and put blocks of flats on top of blocks of flats. Upwards extensions were not envisaged, but nonetheless, that policy about the subdivision of existing dwellings points to provision being made for adequate amenity space, and there's a paucity of amenity space for these 3 new flats, vehicle access arrangements and parking spaces for proposed and existing properties, and protecting the interests of existing residents. Local Plan Policy 55 requires development to respond to context, and I'll come on to that in more detail in a moment in the context of Policy 58. Local Plan Policy 56 deals with creating successful spaces and is criteria-based none of which would appear to have been met with this proposal, unsurprisingly. Local Plan Policy 58 deals with altering and extending existing buildings, and this is the one that is perhaps most relevant. Amongst other things, it requires that proposals reflect or successfully contrast with the existing building form, use of materials and architectural detailing, whilst ensuring that proposals are sympathetic to the existing building and surrounding area, and also retain sufficient amenity space, bin storage, vehicle access and cycle and car parking. Now, in this case, the height, scale and massing of the proposal has a permanent and irreversible adverse impact on the character and appearance of this very suburban locality. This isn't a town centre that requires revitalising. The detailed design, including the choice of materials, neither reflects nor contrasts successfully with the existing very recent development, and again has a permanent and irreversible adverse impact on the character and appearance of the locality. The proposal is for a 10-person development in 3 flats. The provision of only 1 parking space for those 10 persons, ostensibly for the 3-bedroom flat, and the suggestion that the smaller units take their chances with on-street parking because there's no space available on site to park cars, will effectively mean 2 parking regimes for residents and confusion for both the existing residents and their visitors to the site, as well as causing inconvenience and potentially highway safety issues because of the demand for car parking for visitors. And that's not just the visitors to this development, it's to the public house. And of course, it's a slightly changed context with Deliveroo, Uber Eats, Hermes delivering the Amazon parcels and all the rest of it. Likewise, the design and location of the cycle parking, including the Sheffield bike stands, is poorly thought out and a confusing afterthought to serve 10 persons and their visitors. But there is simply no room for more, or indeed for adequate refuse and recycling facilities. The plans show poor quality and inadequate external private amenity space for the flats, which in any event will have an impact on neighbouring amenity. And again, these are existing interests. It's not a whole new scheme of hundreds of houses being developed to meet the minimum standards in your design guide. The impossibility of providing a satisfactory construction management plan, owing to the site constraints, will mean an intolerable impact on the living conditions of existing residents and an unacceptable impact on highway safety from deliveries, etc. And the plethora of knock-on consequences for parking, traffic and disturbance for existing residents means that this development is not a case of looking at the details and honing them. The very principle is clearly wrong. Put simply, the ambition reflected in this application is unachievable on this particular site, seeking a quart in a pint pot and giving rise to an unacceptable level of harm to pre-existing residential interests in a very recently bespoke designed and constructed scheme. It's less than 10 years old. And for that reason, I fully support the residents in their objection to the scheme, and I will now pass on to my next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Janet Grimwood, and I am the management agent recently taken over following several years of not to plan. They have not been good managers and landlords. The questions that have not been answered is about the fire safety. I speak as somebody who is qualified by the Tall Buildings Fire Safety Network. This was a 6-week intensive course run by Russ Timpson, a former firefighter, chartered fire engineer, and former president of the Chartered Fire Institute. I studied how to make my buildings safe, and that's what I want to do. Edeva Court is currently built on a steel frame and concrete structure, and as you can see in the photograph here, the flames would be contained within the unit. The government promised us that residents would be safe and feel safe now and in the future. And we're asking your councillors to keep to that promise. The Health and Safety Executive says industry needs to stop thinking that fire safety should only be dealt with at the building regulation stage. It starts at planning. So what have we got proposed here? Councillors might like to be interested that what is proposed is a modern modular construction. It is not going to be the steel frame and concrete structure that the existing building has. These will be prefabricated units that will be shipped in. As you can see from here, everything is made of site, including the kitchen sink. It will cut down, yes, the time of construction on site, and yes, we will be pleased with that. But unlike concrete, steel and brick, they're almost entirely constructed with combustible materials, and this will be put on the top of a roof, the most difficult place to fight a fire. The Fire Protection Association Technical Director, Dr. Jim Glocking, has warned that this is the next cladding crisis, that modern methods of construction are creating the next fire safety problem in plain sight. We don't want Edeva Court to be the next guinea pig. This is a building up in the Shetlands. You will see that it shares some of the design features that Stephanie Brooks has mentioned, that it's got zinc composite cladding on the outside. This was a complete modular construction. It doesn't share the benefit. This was the fire caused by an electrical fault. That spread within 30 minutes. That's the roof alight. That was it the next day. This is what's being proposed for this building. This is another extension, roof extension. The Cube 2019, 2 years after Grenfell. 45 of 50 available fire engines attended, and you can see where the fire spread. Original construction, hardly affected. You can see here how many fire engines had difficulties getting to that building. Deptford 2018, 122 firemen, 25 fire engines, 12 hours to bring into control. Construction works on the roof started it. Worcester Park 2019, this is a timber construction of 23 flats, destroyed in 25 minutes. The insurance company refused to pay out. All these buildings had passed building regulations. So had Grenfell. We have no confidence. Fire safety should come first. Zinc composite cladding in government tests exhibited the highest contribution to fire growth and the shortest time to burn through, second only to Grenfell style ACM. And yet we have to have it on a roof. You need to think about fire safety at the planning stage. It's not something that you can add on afterwards. Grenfell was a safe building. It was concrete and steel until it was clad. There were 7 cladding fires before Grenfell. Warnings were not heeded. Grenfell had building regulations approval for the refurbishment. There are several fires with MCC construction. Fortunately, none of them have been fatal. People have got out. And that is the minimum standard for fire safety that this will meet. If you accept the risk is minimal, it will still impact on the building insurance. A poll of 70 plus underwriters found that the most felt modular builds presented a higher risk to insurers than standard building methods. The Health and Safety Executive says, think about fire safety at the planning stage. We've been asked to advise on what we would compromise. The only compromise that we can accept is for the construction, the original construction, to be kept. And you will see in the middle photograph, what we thought was being proposed by Avon Ground Rents was just to repeat another floor and keep to the original design. We think that looks much nicer than what is being proposed. It also delivers 4 flats instead of 3. Yes, it will be much more expensive to build, but why should we pay with fire safety? This is the compromise. We don't want this construction, and don't forget that this is close to Addenbrooke's Hospital. These people are doctors, nurses, and people that work from home. Living on a construction site when they're working on shift works will not be pleasant. And I just like to finish on a every child knows a brick and steel construction beat the fox. Thank you.
Phil, you're muted.
I'd now like to pass on to Al Dixon.
Apologies. I was just saying there's 2 minutes left on the allotted 15 minutes for the petitioners, but I'm happy to give you a couple of extra minutes as the applicants had a couple of extra minutes as well. But if you could keep it to 4 to 5 minutes, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Al?
Mr. Dixon, I think you're muted. Can't hear you, Mr. Dixon, sorry.
Perhaps I can just talk on behalf of Al, just over there. The first time we found out about this was when Al was working at home and the fire alarm went off. He found people in his hallway measuring up the building. That is about as much consultation that Avon Ground Rents have given us. We've asked questions about the fire safety. We can put a lift at the back of the building. We are prepared to manage this building as it is. These leaseholders really do not want to have to live through a construction site for 6 months. They will have to move out. That's 12 people's homes that are going to be destroyed by this application, even if we can get it fire safe.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, thank you, Al. Please take over.
Right. The just a picture of Avon Ground Rents. When we said, "What are these people doing?" and they were actually trying to break into the roof and set off the alarm. Woke up doctors. They woke up. They
You've frozen, Mr. Dixon. We can't hear what you're saying.
What's up? Sorry, then I can't.
Apologies, we can't hear you. Yeah, apologies.
Perhaps I could speak up on behalf of Al. My name's Geetha, Dr. Geetha Vedavanam. My husband and Al are joint lead on the joint management of this company. I just wanted to make it clear that Avon Ground Rent were managing this building up until January of this year. And we as residents have only taken over very recently and appointed Janet to take over management. So when the Stephanie mentioned that the proposer was uncertain why we mentioned issues such as soil pipes and fire doors, it's because we have lived with this building for the last 7 years that has been poorly maintained, poorly built and poorly managed. And we took over management to try and improve our situation. So we as residents and as tenants have all raised significant concerns as to how this company will manage the situation. And while there's this suggestion that the issues of how noise and dust and things will be managed and discussed beyond planning, as residents we're concerned that actually that will not be managed appropriately, and we want to know at the planning stage, because once the planning's approved, it affects all of us, whether we want to sell our property, whether we want to continue living in that situation. And essentially, access to this site, for any of you who visited it, access is very limited. I've lived through building work in terms of a loft extension where dust filters through the building. You know, the access to the site in terms of vehicles is very limited. The parking along Wolfstand Way and to the required shops, as been mentioned earlier, is very limited. And yes, there are periods where it's very quiet, but equally there are periods where it's busy. There's a doctor's surgery directly opposite. There's a pharmacy, there's elderly people that need to get medication and attend appointments. And the reality is most people have at least one car plus a bike in Cambridge. And yes, there is a drive on climate change, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee people are suddenly going to get rid of their cars. There was already a boy who was knocked over just in August on Wolfstand Way. If there's more cars parking along the roads, blocking up parking spaces, as has been mentioned previously, these are going to be greater issues. And I just feel that as residents and tenants in that building, living through this period of building work, perhaps for 6 months, but the reality is with COVID and Brexit, you know, the access to materials and labour, jobs are taking longer, construction is taking longer. It's a job that could go on for a long time. And finally, as Janet has very much pointed out, we do not want to live in a fire unsafe building. You know, we chose this building for a reason. We were all happy with the building we bought. We didn't buy it expecting that a few years later something would then be plonked on the top that wasn't going to be fire safe and could potentially put all of our lives at risk.
They also have, they say that they are concerned about
You've frozen again, Al. Maybe you could type it in the chat.
Right, yeah, sorry. This is very frustrating. Very, very, very sorry.
Oh, we can hear now.
It's in and out, I think. But it's about the money for them. It's ever since we started the RTM, it's turned into, this has meant that we can't buy the freehold. It's about pushing the freehold price up. When we this notification about people coming, we were threatened to have our locks changed. We've got solar panels on the roof, which are part of the planning permission. Avon Ground Rents takes all from that. Whenever we ask them for information, we're rebutted, or we're just simply, but having.
I think what Al's trying to say is this is a company that has treated us badly throughout the time they've managed it. Even when they were in charge of managing it, they would email me and ask me to go in and let people in. They didn't inform us when this person was coming out to inspect the building, and so they actually forced open a fire roof, which has a key code to open it. So, as Al says, we feel this is all about this money. This developer has no interest in Cambridge. This is the purpose of building 4 flats where walk up Queen Edith's Way in either direction, and there are huge developments of houses and flats being built off Coldham's Lane, off Abraham Road in Cherry Hinton, on Hills Road itself. Do we really need all this hassle to move 12 residents to find new homes for the sake of 4 new flats, 3 of which won't even have any parking? It just seems ridiculous. that, you know, this isn't a specific spot that really needs more investment. It's not Cambridge Town Centre, and there's plenty of building. The GB 1 or 2 developments near Babraham Road provide plenty more housing for the Science Park and Addenbrooks than these 4 flats are going to provide in a couple of little spaces. So I don't see why this should be a priority, other than it gives this developer more money, this developer that has no interest in this local area, who's not even in the country at the moment. So, you know, we
Dr.
all
Vader
live
Vadam,
locally.
can I ask you to sum up, please? I've given you some extra time, and I think if you've got
Thank
no further
you.
points, then thank you. We
No.
need to move on. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you.
Can I please ask the planning officer to provide an update on the application, and you have 10 minutes, Charlotte, up to 10 minutes to provide an update. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Hope everyone can hear me. Yeah, I'm getting nods, that's fine.
Thank you, Charlotte. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. The planning application was received on the 6th of July 2022. Neighbours and consultees were notified of the application on the 25th of July, and a site notice advertising the application was displayed on the 4th of August 2022. Representation has been received from 15 neighbouring properties. In addition, a letter from GSC solicitors on behalf of the existing residents of Redeemer Court was received. The main objections are the height, scale and massing, the detailed design including materials, insufficient parking, inadequate cycle parking and refuse facilities, inadequate private amenity space, impact on the living conditions of existing residents and highway safety during construction works, impact on residential amenity due to loss of privacy, lack of a lift, fire risks, structural concerns, and a lack of consultation prior to submission. A petition requesting the Development Control Forum with 34 signatures was received on the 22nd of August. The following consultation responses have been received from the local highways authority. They have stated the proposal is for 3 additional residential units with 1 additional off-street car parking space. The streets in the vicinity provide uncontrolled parking, and as there is no effective means to prevent residents owning a car, this demand is likely to appear on street in competition with existing residential units. The development may therefore impose additional parking demands upon on-street parking on the surrounding streets. And whilst this is unlikely to result in any significant adverse impact upon highway safety, there is potentially an impact upon residential amenity which the planning authority may wish to consider. From the Sustainable Drainage Officer, they have stated the proposals have not indicated a detailed surface water or foul water drainage scheme. However, as this is a minor development and there are no known flood risk issues, it would be acceptable to obtain this information by way of conditions. The proposals of Greenreef are welcome and should be detailed in condition. The Environmental Health Officer stated development is acceptable, subject to the imposition of the following conditions: plant noise insulation, construction/demolition hours, demolition construction kind of collections and deliveries hours, noise insulation scheme, and EV charging. And then just to clarify the site history, so in 2013, the site was approved for the demolition of existing public house building and replacement with a new public house, including ancillary 1-bedroom manager's apartment and single 2-bedroom resident apartment above, and a separate block of 12 2-bed residential apartments with associated access, car parking and landscaping. The reference for that is 12/1616/FUL. That was approved on the 18th of September 2013, decided by committee. In 2014, permission was approved for the installation of electric gates at the entrance to the apartment's car park and updated hard and soft landscaping proposals to the residential's apartments. The reference for that is 14/1558/FUL, and that was approved on the 4th of December 2014. And just to clarify, pre-application advice was sought by the applicants regarding this proposal in 2021. That's all I kind of have to give as an update. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Apologies, I should have asked Councillor Davies if you had any thing to say prior to the planning officer update. But if you have got anything you'd like to speak to, you have got 15 minutes if there's anything you wish to contribute.
Yes, I
Councillor
do.
Davies.
Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you. Thank you.
Right. Okay. So obviously, as ward councillor, I have a particular responsibility towards my residents, and the residents at Ediva Court contacted me when they first got wind of this application coming through, and it's left me with a lot of concerns from a process point of view. I think the petitioners have explained that the applicant has not done a good job of keeping them informed, of treating them as equal partners in whatever plans they're developing for this site. And for that reason, I'm afraid I find it very difficult to take assurances now about quotes an absolute willingness to work with the existing residents with a truckload of salt, because there's certainly been no sign of it up till now. And similarly, there seems to be a lot of emphasis being placed by the applicants on the CEMP as a way of managing the nuisance caused to residents during the construction process. Members of planning committee will be aware that I have been pursuing other sites locally where enforcement activity has completely failed to make the developers live up to the commitments and the conditions put on them by the planning approval they've received. I have no confidence, given that this building will be going on top of people's houses rather than on an empty site, that a CEMP can afford these people, existing residents, a reasonable measure of protection. I think they've spoken very articulately about the shock that one incurs when having bought property in a unit which is less than 10 years old. They suddenly find that work can be done despite their wishes, and in a manner which they do not have confidence will render a safe, never mind a nuisance-free existence for them. And a couple of specifics. Stephanie, when she spoke, said that the parking survey was done in May. Her slide said that the parking survey was done in May 2021. Members of committee will be aware of the proximity of Ediva Court to Cambridge Biomedical Campus. In May 21, very few appointments were going on at Addenbrooke's and the adjoining hospitals. Almost all of the work was being done off-site, and no parking survey undertaken in this location in May 21 in any way represents the default parking load on the area. I've already had correspondence in the last couple of months with the housing officer, the City Council housing officer, who looks after the bungalows on Wolfston Way, immediately opposite this site. She and I have talked about the parking pressures there, which mean elderly residents, disabled residents are not able to park their cars. I would be very reluctant to see anything introduced into the area which was going to increase parking demand and the risk that those vulnerable residents in the bungalows across the way might have their parking situation worsened. Ediva Court is, as we've discussed, adjacent to the neighbourhood doctors and pharmacy, and those generate a high degree of parking demand. So I think it is extremely unwise to suggest that it's possible to just off-site the parking that will be generated by these additional units. I'd also
query the assumptions about who might be willing to live in these units. I think it's shrinkingly unlikely that it will be a family in the 3-bedroomed unit. I think it will be a house share, and so therefore assumptions about the number of cars that will be occupying or generated by occupants in these units needs very careful consideration. And it was very interesting to hear Mr. Krantz's comments about how local plan policy relates to this application. I mean, my concern is that the local plan doesn't seem to cover the scenario that we're discussing here. Much of the policy seems to be about impacts of development on neighbours rather than people living underneath it. And what we do here will set a precedent for other sites across the city. Now, I'm hugely impressed by the way the residents at Adiva Court have come together, been resourceful, done what is requested by the DCF process, which is put forward a compromise. They have engaged constructively with the discussion and come forward with what looks to me like a workable alternative. Other residents in less cohesive blocks or with a less active and responsible managing agent in future may not be able to organise themselves to the same extent and will leave themselves vulnerable to exploitation. So I do think the issue of precedent here is extremely important. And finally, what this has done is yet again flag up to me the asymmetry in who has access to which levers in the process. The applicants have had the benefit of pre-application conversations with officers. I'm aware that they had to pay for that, but nevertheless, they've had those conversations. I gather that when the managing agent asked for a conversation with officers to discuss this application, that was not granted. So it seems to me like the process is heavily weighted against the existing residents. And I'm hoping what this DCF discussion can now move on to do is explore how we can protect their interests. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. I will now move on to member questions and issues arising. Members are reminded to express no opinion upon any aspect of today's presentation content, the developers' proposals, or to any responses coming out of this DCF meeting, which might give rise to a view that you have a closed mind to the proposals or the application. Open questions are encouraged to add value to today's purpose. I'll remind members if they would like to speak to indicate their wish to do so in the chat function or by raising your hand, and I'll introduce you when it's your turn to speak. This is a 30-minute section and the committee manager will advise when the time period is up. Councillor Thornborough, I think I saw your hand go up first, so please can you...
Yeah. I just want to say, when applications are approved and they are being delivered on site, it's the applicant and the agent's responsibility to deal with the conditions, the planning conditions. And compliance of conditions is not the responsibility of the local authority. But having said that, I do recognise that there have been some real issues on some sites in Cambridge where the agents and applicants have really seemed to ignore the very important conditions that had been put on the approved applications. Generally, I think it's always good to try and minimise the number of conditions, and if as much, I feel that is where there is concern, putting in more information where something might not normally be covered would be beneficial. So in some applications we've had, the traffic management plan may have been very useful at planning stage, at least the main principles, and also construction management plan. It may be that the principles of that could be agreed or at least be part of the application. I'd like to, I've got a question. One of the speakers said that, that everything, that this is not covered by permitted development as it's in the zone protected for the airfields, and therefore all of our policies are relevant. I wondered if the case officer could talk about that. And then also I'd like to know more about what was said about the parking survey and whether the importance of ensuring that the parking survey is up to date. Thank you very much.
Can we do those questions now then? Charlotte, I don't know if you want to comment on the first question there from Councillor Thornborough.
Can you just repeat it? I kind of partially zoned out just that very sentence. I'm sorry.
We have had sites where there have been issues about how the conditions have been, I think, not fully carried out by applicants, and this has caused real problems on site where the agents and applicants or the contractors haven't conformed with the various conditions to do with construction management or tree surveys and things, those sort of protections. So there's been real problems on site. Is it possible, but we want to reduce the number of conditions as well. Is it possible that the basis of some conditions might come as part of the planning submission, so that at least the very clear principle of aspects that might normally be a condition that actually could be agreed within the planning process, you know, whether it's part of the design and access statement or whether there's clear information on the drawings that would help help in decision making about the planning process and what is to be delivered and how it's to be delivered. Thanks.
We request it from the agent. However, if they are not willing to submit it up front, I think we would struggle to refuse on that reason alone, because it could be dealt with under condition. If that makes sense. Like it will be down to the agent and applicant whether they're willing to submit that information up front.
And I asked about the whether this is all of the policies in our local plan apply to this application. If it's not, is it permitted development or not? And what about the reliance on a parking survey? Thank you.
I had reviewed the permitted development guidelines and it could fall under the prior approval. I do need to double check what I've got Philip Kratz said about the airport issue. I'm sorry, I've got a headache this morning. I can't concentrate. And it was an additional part of that question. There were two parts.
It was the reliance on the parking survey and whether it was raised by the ward councillor, whether it was the survey submitted is 21, not 22.
I'll quickly double check the dates on that. Just bear with me.
I think Councillor Thornborough, just on the policy position, the point that was being made by Mr. Kratz was that the scheme, I think, falls foul of the requirements in terms of the building under the airport safety directive on that. But I think Charlotte's going to have a look at that. But in terms, and because of that, obviously all the local plan policies apply to the assessment of the application. Under prior approval, there's only certain elements of the proposal that we would be required to assess, so character and appearance, impact on amenity. It's not a full assessment, which is what Mr. Kratz was pointing out, that all the policies in the local plan are relevant to the assessment of this application. So whereas if it was a scheme that could be assessed as prior approval, not all of those matters would be assessed as a prior approval application.
So Mr. Kratz is correct.
Yes, in terms of, I haven't looked at the detail of that, but if there's an airport safety measure, if it was within a certain distance of the airport, and then that's something that we would have to look as where it would say whether it was permitted development or not. I haven't got the full list of the legislation in front of me, but if there's an airport safety requirement that is being failed there, then yes, obviously that stops it from being a prior approval.
And just to confirm, the dates of the parking survey were Wednesday the 26th of May 2021 and Thursday the 27th of May 2021.
I think on that point, Councillor Thornberry, as well, we would have to take some guidance from the Highways Department about whether those survey periods were considered to be appropriate or not. I don't believe anything in the consultation that Charlotte referred to has mentioned that the survey period isn't deemed appropriate. But again, Highways would advise us on that in terms of the timings and of when the surveys were carried out. So I hope that's helpful. Councillor Bennett, I believe your hand was up next.
Thank you, Chair. Most of my points have been answered by the excellent presentations. Thank you. But I would like to raise the issue of for the 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom flats where the applicant says they're contemplating family occupation and presumably children, what the play space provision is. I know this area quite well from my cancer treatment, and all the nearest recreation grounds are across busy roads without good zebra crossing access, where I think most parents would be uncomfortable to allow a child to go to play on their own, and I can't see anything on the property to provide play space. So I'll be very interested to see any further details about that.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Does the applicant want to respond on their amenity space provision in regard to that comment from Councillor Bennett?
And mindful that Stephanie might be better placed to answer this question than me, but the proposed development incorporates private amenity space, which is policy compliant in the form of balconies. There is no dedicated children's play space within the site, but that's consistent with the existing building, which doesn't comprise any children's play space at present. The reference to a family size flat is basically because it's a 3-bedroom flat. It allows the opportunity for families to live in that particular unit. It doesn't necessarily mean that a family will take up occupation, but it's generally considered to be a positive aspect of a development because there is a demonstrated need for family-sized units within Cambridge.
Thank you. Councillor Smart.
Thank you, Chair. I was a bit confused that the applicant was speaking at that time. I thought that would be more a response that would come from the case officer. Anyway, I've got about 4 areas of questioning. I'll try and keep it brief for the case officer. Hello, Charlotte. So firstly, there are a few acronyms thrown around. So just for residents who might be listening in, CENP, ACM and RTM. So it'd be good to just clarify what those are. So the next point is we heard a lot of bad reports, good presentations by both sides actually, so thanks for those, but a lot of bad reports. So a lot of it was also not relevant to planning, I guess. So and the applicant didn't have the chance to reply to those. So I think we all need to bear that in mind, those allegations, I mean. The third area of my questions is about what's there at the moment. So I'm presuming from what I've seen on Planning Portal, it looks like there's 12 flats at the moment, so it's going to be +3. I think it seems to be the case, but if you could just clarify, please, Charlotte. And so sort of almost finally, policies 51, 52, 55, 56 and 58. So that's the ones that were referred to in the presentation by the objectors, or I don't know if you call them objectors, whatever they are. Might be good just touch on that, Charlotte, if you have any comments on those. And finally, there was quite a lot made of fire safety. So normally in planning, we don't talk about fire safety in any significant way, although there is an ex-fire officer on planning committee, so it does come up sometimes. And once recently we did defer an item to get out more information with regard to fire. So it sort of does come up, but it's not really a planning consideration. But if you could just clarify where we are on that, please, Charlotte, because normally that will be building control that would deal with fire safety. But clearly, as was presented, it is a concern. Oh, actually, there was one other thing. So it was said that the lift potentially proposed would cost £2,000 per annum. So was that £2,000 for 3 flats or £2,000 per annum for all the flats to be able to supply a lift? I wasn't quite clear on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. Charlotte, some of the, are you happy to run through those questions, although some are probably for the applicant to pick up there?
Yeah, in terms of the acronyms, the CEMP is the Construction Environmental Management Plan. So it tends to be a plan of how developers can control reduce environmental impacts during the construction phase. I also heard ACM and RTM. Which I'm not sure which they were referring to.
Yeah, so there might be something that the applicant,
okay,
or the petitioner, I think, who referred to it.
Okay. Yes, at the moment there are 12 2-bed flats. I believe the ground floor flats have access to private garden space, and anything above ground floor each benefit from a balcony. The policies we would review the application against the policies. I am aware Mr. Kratz brought up policy 52, and this is probably something that I'd have to discuss with managers as to whether it is considered to be a subdivision of garden lands. But all of those policies that he listed, 51, 55 and 58, are relevant to the application and would be part of the consideration. In terms of fire safety, you're correct that it is a building control issue. At the moment, as things stand, in planning, we wouldn't have much weight to request more information or even refuse, because there's nothing really in policy, even national or local level, as it is dealt with building control. And I believe the lift would be a question for the applicant's team, as well as the ACM and RTM.
Thank you, Charlotte. Yeah, could the applicant just confirm the question about the lift and cost per annum, please, or one from the applicant team?
Alan, I think probably I'm best to do that. There were 2 points about the lift. The fact that one of the objectors, doctor, suggested it could go at the back. There literally is not a space that we would not block windows if we put that lift at the back. So I just wanted to clarify that. We did look at that. But the cost was the maintenance cost of the lift, and obviously everybody would be able to use the lift, and so that £2,000 would be spread across all occupants of the building. So that £2,000 is a spread cost, and that is an estimate of the maintenance charges per annum. Chair, may I take the opportunity to respond to the point that was raised about fire? Is this an appropriate moment?
Not for the moment.
Absolutely fine.
Thank you.
Problem. Thank you.
Hand up the petitioner.
Yes,
Yes,
I just
thank
wanted to make the same point about the lift. It would be about £2,000 a year, but that would increase the value of the properties by at least by that amount. There is room at the back for a lift, and if the proposed alternative, a lift shaft could be done, there would also be a service access for fire safety, so that lift could be a fireman's lift. And could it help with the fire safety issue as well? I take the point that it's not a planning application for matter fire safety, but surely it's a moral one, and we should not proceed with something that is untested and unsafe and potentially unsafe. We should not proceed with that. There is no demand for 3 flats. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smart, is your hand a legacy hand, or have you got a further question or comment?
So just a clarification, so if I may, Chair, then. So to be clear then, the maintenance cost of a lift is being proposed at being £30,000 per annum. Because there are 12 flats plus 3 new ones makes 15, £2,000 each.
No, I understand. I understand the total cost
Councillor,
is
no, it's £2,000 in total.
Oh, I missed
£2,000 in total.
Okay,
that's the total cost. Yes.
All right, thank you for that clarification. So, can I just ask one follow-up question, please, Phil?
Certainly.
So, can the case officer comment on any need for affordable housing, as there were 12 units originally, and this would be adding 3 more?
So we wouldn't have the requirement for affordable housing because they are only proposing 3.
Thank you, Charlotte. Councillor Smart, did you have a point of clarification or comment? Your hand's still up.
Yeah, I know. Well, sorry. I mean, Charlotte has answered the question, I guess, but anyway, I think I'm sort of getting into the area of the sort of thing we do at planning committee, really, so I don't want to ask any more questions on that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. Thank you. I haven't got any further hands up from councillors. So if everyone's satisfied with that, I will move on, which is an opportunity for the applicant team to do a summing up for 5 minutes. So I'm not sure who's going to do that, but you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I will provide most of the summary. I'm just mindful that we've had the issue of fire safety raised on a number of occasions today. And whilst it's not a planning matter, I think it is important that we address some pertinent points and particularly some inaccurate information that has been provided in Ms. Grimwood's presentation regarding modular building construction. So with that in mind, I'll just hand over to Stephanie, who will explain what the proposed construction would entail.
Yes, I was very taken aback by the suggestion that it would be modular. There's nothing in our minds in any way that this would be a modular construction. None whatsoever. It would be a steel frame exactly as per the existing building. And may I also point out the second error that you did make, which was that we are not proposing zinc composite panels, because those have absolutely been discredited. This is a zinc finish, which would go on top of a rock wool backing system, which we now know to be absolutely safe. So I do want to just put people's mind at rest about that, because fire plays on the minds of the designers as well as the recipients. So please, I want to put everybody's mind at rest about that point. Alan, over to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Chair and members of the Development Control Forum, we would like to thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. Our presentation included responses to each of the 8 matters raised in the petition. With reference to the concern regarding construction noise, we would reiterate that this matter is normally dealt with as part of a detailed construction and environmental management plan prior to any construction works taking place. The plan is prepared with input from the appointed construction contractor and deals with a range of environmental matters, including mitigation of noise. As I've mentioned, we believe that the construction contractor's input is important. Nonetheless, if it was felt necessary or sufficiently important to provide the principles of construction management, we would be happy to do so at this stage, and could certainly submit a draft construction and environmental management plan to the planning officer. Having regard to car parking, the proposed development includes 1 additional parking space for the 3-bedroom family-sized unit. The application was informed by parking surveys undertaken by a specialist highways engineer, which demonstrated that there is considerable spare parking capacity on the surrounding streets, and the proposed development will have a negligible impact on the overall parking stress in the area. I would also emphasise that the parking survey complies with policies 53 and 82 of the local plan, and we believe that the parking provision is in compliance with the advice and principles set out in the local plan. The application is made against the backdrop of the climate emergency, which was declared by Cambridge City Council in 2019. This is reinforced by national and local planning policies which seek to reduce the reliance on travel by private vehicles, instead promoting opportunities for active travel modes, including walking, cycling and public transport. In response to the suggestion that a DEVA court should include a lift, this is a matter we have discussed with Cambridge City Council's building control team. These discussions confirm that a lift is not required by building regulations. We have also considered the suggestions that there would be a loss of privacy arising from the proposed development. Again, we wish to reiterate that the surrounding properties were carefully considered as part of the design process. The closest facing windows are over 38 metres away, which is approximately twice the setback distance that is normally considered acceptable, as established in the Cambridge City Council Housing Development and Design Guide. There are no windows proposed on the northern elevation facing Dunstan Court, thereby avoiding any loss of amenity. Furthermore, the sides of the proposed balconies have frosted panels to prevent overlooking. The planning application is supported by a detailed daylight and sunlight assessment, which considered the 21 closest and most sensitive window openings on neighbouring buildings. The assessment indicated that every single window will retain daylight levels, which are in accordance with the BRE guidelines. The concerns raised in relation to services and fire safety requirements in the building are matters that will be assessed by the Council's building control team. With reference to cycle parking, the proposed site plan indicates the provision of 6 long stay spaces for future residents and a Sheffield stand to cater for visitors. In summary, the proposed development comprises 3 residential flats that will contribute to the delivery of new homes in Cambridge, including a family-sized unit. There is an emphasis in planning policy for local planning authorities to optimise the delivery of new homes to meet the significant housing need that exists. We welcome the suggestion by residents that an alternative design incorporating a brick-faced facade might provide a suitable compromise, and this is something we are willing to explore through discussions with the planning officer. We consider that the proposed development accords with all relevant adopted planning policies at national and local level, and we would respectfully submit that planning permission should be granted. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hannafy. Could the petitioners please now sum up their points? And again, you have 5 minutes to do so. Thank you.
We haven't discussed who we should do this, so perhaps I could do this. These 3 flats are intended to be lived in by families. Which family would want to take a pram up 4 flights of stairs without a lift? What mature person, who is generally the person that would live in a top floor flat, would want to climb up 4 flights of stairs. The construction noise will be significant. You've heard from the applicant that they will be asked to live in it. This isn't just happening on the roof. This is a staircase being built inside the building. This is pipes, etc., for waste that will be built inside the building. The roof will need to be cut open to make access. People live in these buildings. Often, many of the residents are people working at Addenbrooke's Hospital, or they work from home. The insurance will go up. And the reason why my lack of information, and I might be a little bit inaccurate about this construction, is because there's been no detail forwarded by the applicants. And I've had to research on the internet to find out how these rooftop developments are, and it is modular construction. Fire safety has to be at the core. People should be able to feel safe and be safe in their homes, and this must be a planning consideration. Under the Building Safety Act, it is. We would require a chief fire engineer of our choice to approve these plans before they can proceed, and we think that's a reasonable request. There are other considerations here, but this has not been thought through. And I finish, the reason why a lot of these applications are being made is to increase the value of the freehold, which goes from £4,000 per flat to £24,000 once planning permission is granted because of the development rights. That means that these leaseholders cannot afford to take control of their building completely, which they would really like to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So I'd just like to thank both sides in terms of the petitioners and applicant team for their presentations. I think it's been useful to hear from both of you in terms of the issues raised and obviously the responses that have come forward this morning. Obviously the applicant team have made some suggestions as part of their presentation that they're willing to reconsider on the scheme, including the width of the access, potential further information around draft construction environmental management plan, and also consideration around the alternative design that's been put forward by the petitioners. So I think that's been useful to hear the response to the petitioners' concerns in that regard. Obviously, there's been some elements of the discussion today which aren't relevant to planning and material planning considerations, and obviously those matters will be given limited weight in the assessment of the proposal. But as I say, useful discussion between the parties today. So thank you very much. I just need to formally read out the last section of the meeting protocol, and that is that following the meeting, the committee manager will draft up notes of the meeting, and these will be published on the Development Control Forum meeting webpage, and they will also be appended to the planning officer's report. The planning case officer should contact the applicants, the agent, after the meeting to discuss the outcome of the meeting and to follow up any further action that is necessary. The applicant will be encouraged to keep in direct contact with the petitioners and to seek their views on any proposed amendments. And the council will follow its normal neighbour notification procedures on any amendments to the application. Along with other individuals who may have made representations on the application, the petitioner's representatives will be informed of the date of the meeting at which the application is to be considered by committee and of their public speaking rights. The committee report will be publicly available 5 clear days before the committee meeting. So thank you to everyone. That now concludes the Development Control Forum. Please could the meeting producer end the live stream and confirm when the live stream has ended. Thank you very much again, folks, for your time this morning. Much appreciated.